In the early 1960s, the CIA's Technical Services Department constructed a very specific batch of cigars. They were Fidel Castro's favorite brand, but laced with botulinum toxin and designed as an exploding cigar to detonate right in his face. Because they knew he loved scuba diving, the agency drafted plans to paint Caribbean mollusks in bright, lurid colors to attract his attention underwater, stuffing the shells with lethal explosives. When that didn't leave the drawing board, they considered infecting his diving suit with a chronic, debilitating skin fungus. On another occasion, the CIA handed poison pills to one of Castro's former lovers, intending for her to slip them into his mouth. She hid the capsules in her jar of cold cream, but the pills melted into the thick lotion. Castro figured out she was there to kill him, handed her his own pistol, and went to sleep. She couldn't pull the trigger. Faster, more urgent tone. This data visualization tracks the calculated scale of these operations over the decades. Fabian Escalante, the former head of the Cuban Secret Service, calculated 638 separate attempts on Castro's life. When details of these highly classified plots leaked in a 1970s compilation known as the Family Jewels, they birthed a cultural myth. The American public began to see the CIA as a lawless rogue regency, operating off the leash, inventing wildly imaginative ways to murder foreign leaders in secret. The image of the CIA as a lawless outlier ignores the documented chain of command. The paper trail for these 638 plots leads directly to the desk of the President of the United States. Soon after seizing power in 1959, Castro began advocating for armed struggle in Latin America, actively attempting to export revolution throughout the continent and the Caribbean. The U.S. viewed his government as an existential threat to the region. Early attempts to remove him through conventional means failed, most notably during the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion, where Castro's forces quickly routed and captured American-backed exiles. Thousands of Soviet specialists began arriving in Havana, bringing weapons and building military sites. Cuba became an active Soviet bridgehead just 90 miles from American shores, escalating the physical stakes to the brink of nuclear war. With military operations failing and diplomatic relations severed, the White House faced a vacuum of options. They demanded extreme covert measures to neutralize the threat. Declassified documents and government testimonies show that the initial drive for these targeted killings originated directly within the Oval Office. The Eisenhower administration authorized the first wave of lethal covert actions against Castro. When John F. Kennedy took office, his administration continued and expanded these exact authorizations, keeping pressure on intelligence agencies to eliminate the Cuban leader. The declassified record places these poison pills and exploding shells within a top-down foreign policy strategy, authorized at the highest levels of the American government. This raises an immediate question. How exactly did the United States government legally justify attempting to murder a foreign head of state? The CIA certainly conducted operations that broke the law, like the MKUltra project, which subjected unwitting citizens to human experimentation and violated constitutional rights. However, the targeted killing of Fidel Castro fell into a different legal category. Prior to 1972, there was no United States statute banning the targeted killing of a foreign leader. Congress never passed a law prohibiting the practice. This split-screen legal matrix illustrates how the rules worked even after Congress enacted a federal murder statute in 1972. Title 18, Section 1116, made it a crime to kill a foreign official, but it only applied if the target was physically on U.S. soil or outside their home country. Because the agency exclusively targeted Castro inside his own country of Cuba, the 1972 federal murder statute simply did not apply to him. The government also relied on a defense under international law. They pointed to Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, which permits nations to use force in individual or collective self-defense. Since Castro was hosting Soviet nuclear missiles and actively exporting armed revolution, the United States invoked the doctrine of anticipatory self-defense. They categorized his death as a necessary preemptive military strike required to protect American national security. By exploiting these exact statutory loopholes and international self-defense clauses, the United States legally classified 638 separate plots as perfectly lawful military objectives. Despite all the exploding cigars, poisoned cold cream, and 638 highly funded state-sponsored attempts on his life, Castro ultimately evaded the intelligence agencies. He died of natural causes at age 90. When congressional committees dragged these operations into the light during the 1970s, the resulting public backlash forced the government to formally ban political assassinations. Yet a critical legal distinction remains on the books today. Congress never actually passed a binding law to enact this ban. The restriction exists entirely as an executive order, specifically Executive Order 12,333, signed into effect by the President to quell public outrage. The constitutional reality of an executive order is that it acts only as a directive from the President to the executive branch. It is not permanent legislation. Any sitting president has the authority to secretly amend or completely revoke it at any time. If a president secretly revoked this order and provided classified notice to intelligence oversight committees, it would immediately immunize the agencies from liability, making targeted killings legally permissible once again. When it comes to the highest levels of global power, the only thing separating a rogue international crime from a perfectly lawful government operation is a single signature on executive paperwork.